And we're live.
Good afternoon. I hope you all are having a great Monday. It's sunshiny at the very least, and that's a good thing.
Where?
Well, Councilmember Patterson. So we'll start with our agenda, going through the committee reports, the check-ins on our committees. And with that would mean we start with finance.
Yes, good afternoon, Madam President.
Good afternoon.
Finance, so you all should have seen the legislation. Obviously, we have agenda review on Thursday, and I'll be checking in with my weekly finance this week. I think it's Tuesday. I will say the one thing that sticks out, and I'll yield to Vice President Lightfoot if he wants to add more color to this, is the racial equity tool used for budgeting. You know, those questions were asked last year around racial equity, and this kind of codifies that. Mr. Vice President, anything you want to add to that? Because I think that's the main highlight coming out of finance this month, is that piece of legislation.
Thank you to Madam President, and thank you, Mr. Chairman Evans, and to the council. Yes, this is work that you guys have been well aware of, and we voted last year to put it in the budget for the first time last year around the racial equity and leadership work that we were doing with our Real Initiative. One of the things that came out of the Real Initiative in last year's budget, hopefully you guys read some of it. I knew it was an extensive report that was in the beginning portion of the budget last year. One of the things that came out of that work, ladies and gentlemen, was that we not only do a one-time hit of racial equity, that we would continuously look at our departments. Of course, there are change agents within each department. And last year, it worked pretty well. And one of the things we wanted to do was codify that work, which required a charter change that would require this would accompany our budget every time that our budget come forth, that these particular questions out of OMB would be put forth to every department, and that they would have these particular equity goals that they would have to meet in every budget going forward.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. So there's that, which is great. The other thing too I'll mention is there's a joint facilities use agreement that's there for Adams Street and the city, which is a longstanding relationship that the city has had for a while. Flint Street and School 19, the Frederick Douglass Art Center and School number 12, and the Trenton and Pamela Jackson Art Center and School number 9. So those are big. Those are I think significant things that we continue to do. And then we're appointing a marriage officer. So Jose, I know you were getting married. You could have Miss Bridget Birch White marry you, because we're appointing her as a marriage officer. That's another piece of legislation that's going out. So we could have marriage ceremonies. We have multiple people who can perform marriage ceremonies now. Not only our clerk, but also now our newest deputy clerk can perform ceremony.
And Mr. Chairman, in the event that there's this catastrophic thing that happens to all of them and they all go down, I am an alternate.
Alternate to the
That's
alternate.
right. That's right. That's right. I forgot the Reverend.
So Jose, you might just get me, brother.
That's right. The Right Reverend Willie J. Lightfoot is also to perform ceremonies. Conda, can you still perform also? No? All right, so Conda's done. So that's the main legislation. And I'll say, Madam President, I have to I know I have to get off around 1 o'clock, but I also just wanted to say that I sent you guys an update on the convention center. And the only thing I'll leave you with around the convention center is this, what I call 30-300-30. And that is that the year before last, on average, the convention center contributed $30 million in economic impact to the city, with 300,000 visitors and 30,000 hotel nights. So you know what happened last year, you know what's going on this year. So I don't want to be a Debbie Downer, but that kind of tells you not just what the convention center is dealing with, but what also a lot of our other large scale institutions are probably dealing with this year. So, but I sent you an extensive report with pictures and all types of other stuff on the convention center that you can read at your own time, and let me know if you have questions on that. And then on the 333, we're working on scheduling something for February and March. So we should have those dates before the end of the week.
Mr. Chairman, as far as the convention center is concerned, it seems like I've been seeing, they are using the facility for some testing though, correct?
Yes, and I put that in the report too, Mr. Vice President. They are a testing site for the county, which is great because at least that gives them a little bit of activity. And also thankful to FoodLink because FoodLink has stored stuff there over some time. So there's been some activity, nothing to the level to get to that $30 million in impact that they've had, but at least we're seeing a little bit of things going on. And they don't qualify for, some of the last round of PPP funding state stuff. So, but there is a little bit of activity going on, but still a long way to go to get back up to where they were.
Yes.
Is it testing or vaccination?
Vaccinations.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Vaccinations.
Okay.
I would just say that pardon me, President Scott, I would just say that the work they're doing there really does show Chairman Evans the huge role they play in the community. It doesn't fill any of the revenue gap, obviously, but the fact that they've stepped up in so many different ways, hopefully will not be forgotten by people in this community.
Yeah, thank you.
Also coming into, I believe I'll be putting it in the Finance Committee, the appointment of another person to the Ethics Board. I think it usually comes out of here. So
yeah.
I'll tell you now that Douglas Escher, I got two other names from council members. One of the names, the individual is a Democrat, and we had to have somebody of another party. You can only have, there has to be at least one person from another party other than Democrat. And the other name, the person is unaffiliated, so I wasn't able to consider those. Mr. Escher's resume will be unfiled in the clerk's office. I'm going to try and get that in on the ground.
Thanks.
And
I was just going to say the other appointment too is the library board. I don't know if I mentioned that. That's another appointment that's coming through to finance this month as well.
Yes. And I'll take this. I neglected to introduce our newest member, and that's Mrs. Bridget Birch White. If you all would welcome her, please. Okay, thank you.
Just a quick question.
Yes.
Would the convention center be eligible for the shuttered venues funding through the federal government?
No. And I'm glad you asked that, Mike, because of course, after the last meeting, I went and asked. So if you look at that report I sent, it talks about how they're not eligible,
Okay.
which is sad. Yeah, they don't qualify.
All right. Councilmember Patterson with the Neighborhood and Business Development Committee.
Okay, well, we have our meeting on Wednesday, but just going through the itinerary we've got here, a good month. I mean, we've got biggest thing, well, not biggest thing, but just in order. Center for Youth, Center for Teen Empowerment is purchasing property across the street from the place where they're at now. They're trying to do some development there, so that's in the process. That's a good project that we're doing. Picking up some property next to the World of Inquiry, the old Chinese market, Kentucky Fried Chicken there. We're buying that for the school district so that they can tear it down and open it up for green space and can't have too much of that good stuff going on. I am a little concerned about 46 in URA 2 regarding moving an item from one place in the Bull's Head Plaza to another spot. I'm just still, in my mind, my question is, why are we reimbursing the county to move? If somebody else told you to move, they wouldn't pay you to move. So I'll save that for our meeting. Really cool introductory 47, the $6 million we're getting for rent subsidies for the back rent up to a year. The county's got 15 million to go along with it. We're going to work collaboratively. That's a very cool thing. And the last thing is we've got some more dollars for business support that's going to be coming up. So that's kind of what's going on this month. I'll have more details. We'll have more questions as we go. I don't have any answers for any of this stuff because we got it Thursday and today's Monday.
I just want to offer, just want to say, I'm not going to go deep in there, Mike, but
Okay.
but I have to say this because it's just important. The Teen Empowerment Project is a beautiful project.
Okay.
that is a game changer for our not only our city, but potentially the region. And my understanding, that will be the beginning of potentially them expanding in an east side version of similar quality. I don't know if you guys have had a chance to see the renditions of the building they're proposing, but that is a potential to be a real, I mean, we often hear from our youth oftentimes that there's not enough to do, there's not enough places to go, there's not a, I mean, here's an opportunity that I think could be really a big deal, not only for the Southwest area, but for our city.
Well, you know, hey, if you and Lachey like it, I love it. So, you know.
I like it. It's going to transform that whole area. It's going to be one of those anchor buildings. It's going to just be remembering something that we can remember and transform that whole building, that whole area.
Very cool.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Gruber and the PPW committee, please.
Yeah, thank you. Like Councilmember Evans and Councilmember Patterson, I have not gotten a chance to meet with the department yet, but there's some pretty good self-explanatory projects on the docket this month. A lot of things related to lighting. One thing I think is particularly useful is there's a whole piece of legislation around bringing a lot of our street lamps to LED, which is great for our climate action plan. Also doing underpass lighting. I don't know, for those of you who ever walk or bike underneath the St. Paul overpass there right by the Genesee Brewery, when they painted that white and put lighting up there, really transformed the experience of going underneath and going through, and made things more walkable and made everyone feel safer. So we're going to do a whole lot more of that, which is great. And lastly, I would just add, just on a technicality point, last month, you'll all remember we had to hold 3 pieces of legislation related to changing the dimensions of certain streets. And that was only because we just did not get the public meeting noticed in advance with enough time. So that's all been taken care of, I believe. And we should be voting on that this month. And those are, I think, very transformative projects in terms of pedestrian safety in our city. So that's really what's on top of mind for PPW.
Councilmember Gruber, do we have for the climate action plan, we've done a lot, and I think we've been faithful to moving forward with it, but did we set time frames for various activities? I know most of them are ongoing, but were there any benchmarks within that as well?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, when I was not in the chairmanship of the committee when the plan was passed or approved initially, so I would imagine that there probably were some areas where there were particular time commitments. I will say that a lot of it, I think, is woven in well to our comprehensive plan, which is something that, you know, we as a council will certainly make sure continues to happen. But when I meet with Commissioner Jones tomorrow, I can ask, in particular, the Division of Environmental Quality, if they can provide some type of guidance as to where we are in comparison to where they expected us to be.
Right. Yeah. I think we've done a lot. We've been very committed to implementing that plan.
Yeah, there's a lot of really good stuff happening, and you know, it's little things like changing streetlights to LED is not something that, you know, is big and bold, but it's really important, and it's going to set us up for success long term. So I'll ask about that specifically tomorrow.
Thank you. Councilmember Lightfoot for the Public Safety, Youth and Recreation, Youth and Human Services.
I know, right? I got to get used to that myself. Thank you, Madam President, to the council. There is a lot of new stuff happening around the animal shelter, and they're doing some good stuff over there. If you're a big animal lover like I am, you should be excited to hear about some of the work that they're doing. One that I would draw your attention to, and I have yet to meet with my department heads yet either, but just going through the particular pieces of legislation, this piece on the Friends of Verona Street agreement, that's new. This is a new agreement. that will look like a couple positions going from part-time to full-time there. Community outreach specialist for the Rochester Animal Services, the foster care and transfer coordinator position. So that one's something to kind of keep your eye on a little bit. I know they are, a lot of volunteer work happens over there, so it's nice to see them get some additional resources and services. Also, there's a grant from the Rachel Ray Save Them All grant. That's new. This is the first time they're receiving that grant. Funds will be used for animal behaviorist forms of aggression, which I think is a cool thing. And then there's the home grant where they're looking to, give me 1 second here, purchase. Let me see here. Yes, 64, introductory number 64, authorizing home-to-home program agreement for Rochester Animal Services, which they're helping to find better use resources, technology to help find and place pets. So a lot of stuff happening around the animal services. But other than that, other than the pregnancy prevention program through Channel 5 RCTV, I didn't really see anything that was outside of our normal work, but there are some new grants, some new funding, some new things that Animal Services are doing. And I'm always happy to see them forging forward and receiving more assistance, because God knows that they can use the help. They do some tremendous work over there at Animal Services. Other than that, Madam President, that's all I have until I have further conversations with department heads.
The introductory number 64, the home to home program, it references fees in the last two sentences, and there's no mention of fees before that, but it makes it sound like we know what the fees are. I mean, what they're telling us is that we don't have to pay it, which is always good, but there's no reference to fees prior to that in there. So what are they? When you meet, just find out what those fees are that we're not having to pay, and being glad about it.
Will do, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mhm.
And since we're in public safety, we're going to deal with the elephant in the room.
Absolutely.
You all are more than aware of the situation that occurred on Harris Street, and you've seen, because we did forward you the information that we have and that regarding it. And of course, one of the big questions was, why wasn't the PIC engaged? And I believe that the commissioner spoke to that, and it was something to the effect that they're not fully activated.
Can I speak to that just a little
Please
bit, Madam
do.
President? And of course, Mary, because I know you and Lachey can jump into it. But I want to say this for the public. And we talked about this before in our last meeting, and I was saying this is no perfect thing, and we kind of went back and forth about that a little bit. And I was saying, I've been to a lot of these type of incidences where things can change very quickly and rapidly, and things. It's not a perfect scenario with this pilot program. My understanding, and any individuals can correct me if I'm wrong, it's not to divert from what happened. It's not to take away from the sensitivity of anything, or the priority of the fact of what went wrong and what happened and accountability and all that. I'm just simply stating my understanding of the facts. This call came in as a stolen vehicle, That's how this call came in. They got there, and my understanding is they began to see that this was some type of domestic family situation. Now, in the past, from my understanding, police had an opportunity when they got on the scene that they were able to activate fastly. The police had that tool. Now, I don't know what happens with that tool now, with the new things that we've introduced, and we're changing a lot of our protocols and procedures around responding to different types of incidences, either with police or without police. But at this particular incident, from my understanding, police were there. They called AMR, and that was the only tools that they dispatched. This did not come in as a PIC type of situation or call. Now, could it come in the future as one? Is this something, that could happen later? Just for the public's sake, I want the public to understand, one, that the PIC thing is a pilot, it's a new program, and it has very specific parameters at which they respond to and how that response is engaged. Two, as we're growing and learning and doing this work, that it's going to be some growing pains. There are going to be some things that we're going to have to learn and get better with as we're beginning to do these things, because there will be incidences that get called for one thing, and as I said before, they can easily, quickly turn into something else. We have to begin to have that conversation about what happens after that something else, especially when the police are there first. So I'd ask Mary, or I'd ask Lachey to chime in. And if I'm wrong, if I'm totally off base, Mary, please help me. But I think there's this misconception that the community has that thinks every time there's an incident that PIC team's going. And that's not necessarily the case.
That's not the case. That is not the case. It's a tiered response. It's set up in that way. So what can happen is the police department can request the team. So we would have to look at if that scenario would generate that kind of response. We have to continue to investigate that particular scenario. But I would suggest that looking at the video, just the short clips of the video, that could have been, at least from my eyes, that could have been an option for the police department to dispatch the PIC team.
Yeah, I have some questions
despite
about
all of that, regardless of that, and we're going to be learning as we go. We're going to constantly be evolving and growing and learning and getting better. And while that is happening, we cannot stop using common sense, empathy, compassion, those things that distinguish us as humans from animals. So I appreciate that the PIC team wasn't engaged, and it's not set up so that it's going to be infallible for that. But we do have to acknowledge that there are some things we can always do.
Oh, absolutely.
Treating people.
Absolutely.
The dignity, the respect, the culture around all of that. And there's some larger problems that I hope we get into those conversations at some point that we have and that are systemic, ladies and gentlemen. And we might as well just be honest about that, upfront about that, transparent about that. Okay.
Absolutely.
And we're and I would say this, we through the various avenues of action teams that we currently have right now, between the WilmerHale, the Race Commission, the task force or working group, working along with the PAB and UCLM, we are addressing a lot of these issues. Soon, this information and plan will be coming to the community very, very soon for extensive community input. So we're at the beginning stages of dealing with a lot of these issues. However, when something arises, as it has done, we have to be quick, swift in dealing with them, acknowledging these situations, what went wrong, holding people accountable, and dealing head on with what we know to be inappropriate behavior, period. We make no excuses for anyone that is doing inappropriate behavior. My biggest thing is treat people like you want to be treated. Talk to folks like there's no reason to talk down or disrespect people in a manner as they're not treated with humanity and dignity. There is absolutely no excuse for that. And I will tell you that is something that we're going to have to weed out from the top down. And it's going to be extensive work that we're going to have to be committed to, and we're going to have to address. This is not going. Come on, let's just be honest. We're gonna face situations. But I want to say and commend the administration. I want to commend the chief. I want to commend the president, Scott, because we got informed, and all of you got all of the information we had within less than 24 hours. We're learning. We're getting better. We got a lot more work to do. But we're learning from our mistakes. And I just want us to be clear about that. And we are addressing things as they arise, and there's more work to be done. And it's gonna be coming out very soon for community input, and we're taking a tremendous dive into the policy, practices, and procedures that this stuff should have been done a long time ago. And we're committed to keep making sure that this type of stuff doesn't happen again in the future. Mary, you had yourself unmuted.
Wait a minute. I've been here for a minute now.
I think Mary was ahead of you, Mike.
No, I was ahead of Mary. I had my question up I had my hand up when we started.
Okay.
I was directly asked to comment and I'm trying to get in. So I want to just elaborate, the PIC team, as Councilmember Harris was saying, this is it's meant to be a tiered response, but we didn't get there yet. So the PIC team had been in operation for 10 days and was starting out with 3 call types that did not require a police response. So because this came in to police first, that's why the PIC team wasn't called. But absolutely the goal of the pilot is to go to those types of calls, either dispatched by police or by 911 when, I think it came in as family trouble. But, if we want the pilot to be able to scale up to meet the need that we have, I think it's going to take further commitment and investment, and to keep it going after June, because the pilot's only until June.
Councilmember Patterson.
Thank you. Well, let me just start at the top, and if I offend anybody, then you're just offended. I don't believe for a second that if this had been a 9-year-old white girl in North Winton Village or on Park Avenue, she would have been pepper sprayed on a mental hygiene arrest. I just don't believe that. Now, if I'm wrong, I'm just wrong. So that's 1. 2, it's a mental hygiene arrest. They never look good. But with that all being said, from what I understand, on a mental hygiene arrest, you don't necessarily have to go in the car. You had a ton of officers around there. So how come y'all just couldn't stand around and let her scream and, wait for the ambulance to show up? I'm incredibly concerned because I'm here in the office and I'm going through all of the unredacted video. And one of the videos I'm looking at is an officer looking across the car at the back of the child while the other officer is saying, well, honey, if you don't get in, I'm gonna have to give you the pepper spray. Man, what y'all doing? I'm just gonna go right there. What are y'all doing? We govern with the consent of the governed. And the corollary of that is that we police with the consent of the policed. And when the community honestly looks at you and says, this is a baby, and you didn't give her the love that we would expect you to give her, and that's not me blasting all the cops, because they did work. They didn't just come in here and bull this girl down. They tried. But when we get to the end, and it's reach, shake, in the eyes, I don't understand that. I just don't understand that. So my question is this policy? Is this RPD policy? Is this written out and formalized? Is this how we do business? Because if this is how this community does business, it's time to change business. This is absolutely unacceptable. Period. I don't want to hear about, well, I ain't trying to hear that. I want to hear, if this is policy, I want to hear how you changing the policy. And if the officer has done something wrong, I need that officer disciplined. Not excessively, but appropriately. And I need them disciplined in a way such that other officers will understand that this ain't how you do it. Thank you.
Can I answer? Can I just touch on? I see.
Vice President Lightfoot, let me go to Councilmember Gruber.
Absolutely.
Oh, I wasn't. I'm happy to talk after. Will, if you want to address what Mike said, all right. Well, I guess the only thing I just want to add is, I think Councilmember Patterson's question is a really good one, and what I did listen to with Mazzio yesterday, or I've lost track of time if it was yesterday or the day before, is essentially an argument that there is no prescriptive policy because things change so readily, and yet ultimately, as what I heard from both you, President Scott and Vice President Lightfoot, in different ways, is that there must be a policy about the golden rule. There must be a policy about treating someone the way you would expect to treat your own 9-year-old, or you would expect to treat your 9-year-old niece or whomever it may be. There just has to be. And if there isn't that policy on the books right now, then we have to make that policy on the books. And I'll just note that Councilmember Lupien and I both back in July, very different world, sent a memo to then Chief Singletary specifically asking for RPD to invest in trauma-informed training to make sure that they approach things with a trauma-informed lens. Chief Singletary during the budget hearings, I believe, talked about wanting to do some trauma-informed training. Well, regardless of anyone else's intent, and from the video we watched, nobody, and I mean nobody, approached that with any sense of what trauma means or how to do things with a trauma-informed lens. And I don't care if there's no policy if the policy is great. The policy has to be black and white, that you have to treat people with a trauma-informed lens and that you have to abide by the golden rule. And we have to address the elephant that Mazzeo put in the room by saying that there's no way to say whether things were okay or not okay because it's too gray. Gray doesn't work in this case. It just doesn't.
Vice President Lightfoot.
I totally agree, and that's some of the things that we're looking at too. Do I know if it's policy or not? No, I know that we've asked for that information from Chief Harriet Sullivan. We're looking to get that information back. I know that we're taking a deep dive into with all of the things that I mentioned before, the different race commission, the WilmerHale. We're looking at policy, practice, and procedures right now. But at the same time, there's a culture thing that I don't want us to really overlook, because you can have all the policies in the world, but if people don't adhere to the policies and they don't want to adapt to these policies, then they don't need to be working for this city, period. That is the real issue. You can't regulate people's morality. So if they don't have the right morality to be on this job, and the temperament and the ability to the patience and the forthright of how to treat individuals, then they don't need to be getting a paycheck from these citizens. That's the way I view this. And I would also say that the cultural piece is a piece that we have to begin to deal with through not only the policy, but through the training, right, that they're receiving on a regular basis, because these things are some of the things that are in the Race Commission plan. There's some of these things are in the plan that WilmerHale is doing, and a lot of this work is being done as we speak, believe me. However, there's to me a bigger issue, and as well as some of the things emails that you guys have received, there's a bigger issue here to me that is a total derelict and disrespect of policy, even current existing policy, practices, and procedures. And that's what has to be addressed from leadership on down, that it will not be tolerated anytime that you veer away from any policy, practice, procedures, as well as common sense. Some of this stuff is just plain old common sense.
Councilmember Melendez.
Yes, thank you, Madam President. I agree with almost all of what has been said, actually all of what has been said. But one of the things I want to jump on is I think this is the opportune time for us to really look at what we've been doing with PIC and thinking about how can we, in the moment, right now, look at expanding that as quickly as reasonably possible so that we can add additional responses to this. Because I think in my mind, when it comes to first responders, I'd like to see more and more responses that are done by those mental health professionals and those who understand these situations. They're really trained for it. And I think one of the challenges we have is that in this situation here, in addition to the 911 call being, coming in as something else, there was no way in the officer's mind to activate that. And I feel like we have to find a way to expedite that and scale it up for the purposes of youth. I think in my mind, with any young child in crisis, there should be some form of mental health responder. That's where I would like to see this go eventually.
Thank you, Councilmember Lupien. I think you had an additional comment.
Yeah, a couple. Oh, shoot. Sorry, I muted the wrong one.
You're
I
muted.
think that,
You're muted.
am I?
Oh, but no, I can hear you on this one. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, yeah, sorry about that. In terms of response for minors, I think we should look at, for the PIC team, should they be called whenever there's a minor present? For calls like this, they knew that there was a young girl, and I feel like that should be a trigger point to involve mental health professionals. Even if it's not coming in as a mental health call, because when a youth is involved in really anything that involves the police, I think there's endemic mental health implications, and I think we need to be looking at where are the places that police belong responding to, and I hope that Vice President, that some of the work that's coming out of the team that you and Councilmember Melendez are on are dealing with that, kind of looking at the role of the police and where they belong and where they don't. I hear so much kind of like controversy over this idea of defund the police in the community, but to me that's what that means, is really thoughtfully understanding where the police aren't as qualified, and I think they'll say themselves that they don't want to respond to these calls, that they don't belong on these calls, and providing the funding for the appropriate response, which in this case I think would be the PIC team. But I really think that we have to take a serious look at that, and that understanding that the PIC team needs support. They're going to need more people. They're going to need more funding, and knowing that we have a budget cut coming up in this next budget, I really would like to take a serious look at where that money comes from, and if the police are responding to less calls, that if we're struggling for funds, that we take a look at that.
I think that concludes our standing committee reports. We can get report outs from our boards and commissions. We got the convention center, health. Who's doing health?
Yes, Madam President. The Board of Health did not meet in the month of January. They canceled the meeting. I think they were working on the pod stuff and trying to get that up and running, so we did not have a meeting.
Okay. The youth bureau?
Yes, Madam President. First of all, there is a Monroe County youth agreement in our packet this month for 2020, money that was received for them last year. So I want to draw your attention to that. Our first meeting of the year is actually today. So we haven't met yet. And our next chair's meeting, I'll have an overview of how today's meeting went. And then since I'm on the line, I'll say Redco, we did hire, filled our board. We did get 3 new members on the Redco board, 3 great new members, and we're forging along with.
Can't hear you.
And I said, and we're forging along with the work that we're doing with that. So we have added some additional people, and I don't know if Mike wants to speak anymore to Redco, but.
No, that's good.
All right, thank you.
Okay. The library board?
Yeah, the library, the libraries are, again, they're doing their best to respond to, very, very kind of dynamic situation when it comes to schools and being able to remain open. The biggest piece of news from the libraries, I think, is that I think you all saw this, but Dr. Tali Reeves left her position as the director of all the branch libraries, and her position was just filled. It was an internal promotion, and I haven't met her yet, but very excited for the library to fill that role. The branch libraries play such a vital role in our community, and they're doing their best to respond to a difficult time. I'll also just give the 2 other updates while I have the floor, President Scott. Does that make sense?
Sure.
So ABC, they just had a really successful event, 3-day event during the month of January over Zoom about racism as a public health crisis. They're doing their best to respond, knowing that Head Start follows the RCSD schedule. So, I think a lot of the context, by the way, of what we're experiencing right now is that a lot of our youth too are in very unstable situations because the institutions that we've grown to rely on are not there for people right now for a variety of reasons. And I think that's something that we need to think about as well. And I know ABC is doing their best. And then I would just give a quick update on Peace Village, which, Peace Village usually sees a decrease in census this time of the year. And I think that will continue to happen. We did get approval. This is something that I know is probably important for everyone to hear, especially based on the conversation we first had with Peace Village. We got approval from the mayor and the fire marshal to actually put up a couple of shelters at Peace Village. They're not going to pierce the ground. They are called Shelter 2.0s. They've been made by the House of Mercy, among some other folks. And the fire marshal, Deputy Chief Shriver, actually approved these. My understanding is that she is not someone who's going to approve anything that there's even a remote question of concern. So that's a good thing, and we'll pilot those to see how they go. Peace Village will be responsible for raising the dollars to continue to build those if that's how we decide to move forward. But certainly before there's any type of major decision about long-term plan for Peace Village, it'll come to council for a conversation, but these are to pilot a couple of shelters for the winter months. So that's an exciting announcement as well.
And these are these communal, or they're where they sleep, or is it where they gather?
They're individual, kind of like an individual bunk, basically. One of the ways that we've been talking about it on the board is to think about Peace Village really as a campground, right? I mean, that's really ultimately we want to get to a point where it is considered kind of a campground for folks with, some guiding principles and some very basic infrastructure. And this is a step towards that. I'll also just say briefly, obviously the county has been putting up a lot of people in hotels, but with what's going on with what just happened with House of Mercy, and with what's going on in some of the hotels, and even what's going on across the country, Austin recently, the city of Austin actually purchased some hotels to do some homeless services. Of course, they have a very different structure of how their homeless services dollars flow versus us, where they flow through the county. Probably in Austin, it's much more city and urban focused. But we might want to organize a work session at some point with some folks from the county to try to understand what's happening with the homeless population during COVID. This is something that I think we all knew was a major risk early on in the pandemic, and lo and behold, in the last several months, it's really started to become a major tragedy. And if there's anything that we as a city can do to be helpful, I think we ought to be.
Kanda, am I missing any boards? Is that it? Did I miss anybody?
The land bank and
Okay.
Councilmember Harris. You're muted, Councilmember Harris.
You're muted.
And I
There we
have
go.
here, okay. I sent everybody over the land bank report. And the last meeting that we had was in December. We have some really exciting things coming soon. One of them is there's a lease purchase program, which will occur with the Urban League of Rochester. That program will fund approximately 41 single-family homes on various different lots across the city of Rochester. And that will be occupied by homeowners with an area median income of below 60%. And those sites will be at various locations across the city of Rochester. The other couple of things that we have here is there's going to be 5 new constructions by properties in various locations, one on Pollard Street, Taft Street, Woodward, Clay, and McGee. The land bank has put up $50K, which will be a grant for each property. The total construction cost is about $250,000. and it will most likely sell for about 125,000. These are, I balled for these homes are eligible for closing costs and set up for first-time home buyers program. These individuals who purchase these homes will be required to live there for about 10 years. And there's one particular property that's set up for handicap accessibility, and that's the Taft Street home. And then we also have a new program that will allow for home buyers or home purchasers to purchase a home with the assistance of legal services and home inspection. So the grant will provide the funding to provide those services to individuals who may not necessarily be purchasing a home through a traditional means by way of mortgage or a lending process. The grant is about $250,000 that will be awarded to individuals who meet the income guidelines, or actually the guidelines for that. And then finally, then we have 6 Madison Street, which I talked about before. There are 2 owner occupants who are in the process of being approved for that. And there's 2 proposals that came through, so they're looking at which has the best proposal. And those individuals will be, the individual who will be getting that proposal will have to have a 10-year occupancy requirement, deed restriction. And that concludes my
Harris,
report.
would you send that to us in writing? It sounds like there's a lot of great stuff going on.
I already did. I sent it to you in writing
When did you send it out? I don't remember seeing it.
during the meeting.
Okay. Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so very much. So I believe that covers all of the business that we had before us for today, unless someone has something else they want to add. If not, we will adjourn, and I will bid you adieu. Have a great day, great week.